Dylan, and we, of course, will continue to cover that right here throughout the afternoon. Well, it's time now for today's Big Three. Our topics: no comparison, race, and the president, and our must-reads. Let's bring in MSNBC contributor and former Bush Cheney senior advisor Robert Traynham, Jason Johnson, political science professor at Hiram College, and Dafna Linzer, MSNBC.com managing editor. Welcome to you all.
Hello there.
Good afternoon.
So, Robert, I want to start with you. There's a divergence of opinions on our first topic. President Obama's top advisors are pushing back strongly on comparisons to George W. Bush because his second term was bogged down by plummeting approval ratings and questions about his competency, crystallized in this infamous moment after Hurricane Katrina. All right, the sound we were going to play is of him, you know, Brownie, heck of a job. We all know that. It's a very fair quote. So, Robert, what do you make of that? Do you think this is a fair comparison?
Well, I think it's a bit of a stretch, and the reason why, obviously, with Hurricane Katrina, you had tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of lives that were at stake there. So it's a little bit different, although health care is obviously equally important. But the question becomes is whether or not the president, meaning President Obama, pushed his staff at the appropriate times all throughout the healthcare.gov rollout to ask the tough questions and make sure that they were held accountable. And it doesn't seem like that was the case, either A, because they were afraid of him and didn't tell him all the gory, bad details over the summertime, or, in fact, he didn't ask the tough questions. Well, regardless, he was asleep at the switch because ultimately he is responsible, as he said during his press conference late last week. So the comparisons to Hurricane Katrina are a bit of a stretch. However, this president is responsible for the debacle of, we now know, of the healthcare rollout.
And Dafna, MSNBC.com has an article about this, and it says that there's absolutely no comparison here. What are your thoughts?
Those are my thoughts, basically. I mean, I think, you know, people have been trying to find Obama's Katrina since the day Obama was inaugurated. We took a look at every time this meme was used and tried to attach it to this president. And it started, you know, shortly after he was inaugurated with whether or not AIG bonuses were Obama's Katrina. You know, I don't know why there's this desire to try and paint him in that moment that was, you know, a moment that basically altered President Bush's second term completely. I just don't see the comparison. I understand what others are saying in terms of making sure that the president is seeing and hearing, you know, what the facts are on the ground. But I just think, you know, trying to create some kind of impression that President Obama is overseeing a disaster, the magnitude of a hurricane in which 800 people were killed, just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Well, and to your point, it is worth noting that people died in Katrina, so that's it's a very delicate comparison to be leveled. But Jason, you know, the comparisons, you know, accuracy aside, do you think that this could have the same effect on President Obama that the disaster of Katrina's mismanagement had on President George W. Bush, in terms of if the government's website is not fixed by their self-imposed deadline at the end of the month, could it really speak volumes about his ability to move forward for the rest of his term?
No, I think it's a ridiculous comparison because Katrina wasn't even George Bush's Katrina. The people who are using this comparison now, they had 100 different excuses for George Bush at the time. They said it was Ray Nagin's fault. Did Ray Nagin mess up the Affordable Care Act, you know, web pages? I don't think this makes any sense one way or another. Look, it's been 6 weeks. If this is still a debacle by next November, then fine. Then Barack Obama takes a hit and Democrats in Congress take a hit. But I don't see any reason to say that this is some four-alarm fire right now, and it's another example of a ridiculous comparison to an actual tragedy, just like saying that Obamacare was the same thing as Jim Crow laws. It's more ridiculous pandering by the Republican Party.
All right, the consensus from our panel, at least, is that it is not, in fact, an accurate comparison. All right, when we come back, we're going to be speaking about the controversy created by some of Oprah Winfrey's comments. Don't go anywhere.